Hello, this is Pat Lynch, and you are joining the Career Pathways podcast. We hope you're a frequent listener, and we have another great guest in store for you today. If you're a first-time listener, well, welcome. You're going to really enjoy this. This is your first time. You're going to get an extra special guest. We have Dr. Cassia Oliveira. Is that pronounced correct?
Yes.
Close enough.
Close enough.
English, I butcher it like any American, but she's a professor of biology over at Lyon. You're going to hear a whole bunch from her in a second. But before we get into the interview, I have somebody else, the MVP, the Ayatollah of rock and roll himself, producer Jayson. Say hello.
Most valuable producer here, MVP, producer Jayson.
That's right. Making the magic happen. And I can't, if you ever remember, there was a TV show a gazillion years ago called Remington Steele. And so I'm kind of the guy, who's the dumb guy that's the face of the organization. The brains is behind the camera right there, and that's Jayson. And as we learned yesterday, I kind of called him that you are my huckleberry. Yeah. And you know what that means?
No.
Oh, yeah. It means somebody who has your back and you can always count on.
Okay, cool.
She's impressed. All right. Well, welcome, Cassia. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, we always start the podcast with asking our guests to tell us a little about yourself, kind of where you're from, kind of where you went to school, and kind of what was the pathway for you to eventually end up here at Lyon College.
I will. So, again, thank you for having me. I'm originally from Brazil. That's where the accent comes from. Students call me Dr. O because they struggle pronouncing my last name. It's Oliveira, but yeah, it's hard for Americans. The R is tough. So yes. Dr. O is fine, but that's just for yes. students. I've been in U.S. for 21 years. Mm-hmm. But just, I guess, starting with my background from Brazil, I am a biologist by training. I attended São Paulo State University, where I received my Bachelor of Science in Biology. Mm-hmm. And love biology, love science, and decided to continue on a master's degree in genetics, also from the same university. And then I was actually invited to come to U.S. Mm-hmm. I met my PhD advisor in a genetics conference in Brazil back in 2001. And he invited me to come. He had money, grant money. And so I wasn't really sure where I was going in U.S. I just knew I was coming here. And it turned out it was Arkansas. And I mean, I love Arkansas. It's the natural state, great for biologists. So I attended the University of Arkansas from 2003 until 2010. Well, actually 2008. I stayed for a postdoc there. Mm-hmm. And my PhD is in evolutionary biology. So I am actually, even though I am a biologist and geneticist, it's really my training is in evolution. Yeah. And my research was focused on speciation, which mm-hmm. is how new species are formed. Yeah. So evolutionary biologists, we're really interested in understanding how species change over time. Because this is really the definition of evolution, is like a change in allele frequencies over time, meaning that if the trait is heritable and you have traits that do better than others, then those that have higher fitness are the ones that are selected for because they get to reproduce more and they increase in frequency over time. Mm-hmm. And this can really affect all of our lives, different aspects of our lives. And I can talk about it more later.
Oh, absolutely. One thing with this being a career, a podcast about careers, mm-hmm. What advice would you give as far as students who are interested in biology as a major? And just
mm-hmm.
kind of what things do you, because I'm sure you've advised many students over the years about just that.
Yes, I have actually advised a lot of students at Lyon, and we just finished advising. Yes. By the way, next week is pre-registration, so don't forget to go to my Lyon, sign up for your classes. I feel that a lot of students, they get intimidated with science because they feel that by default, many of them is just too hard and they can't do it. And my answer is yes, you can, but it does take time and commitment. You know, it's not a major that you can just say, oh, I'm going to go to class and I'm done. You will have to study every day. You will have to learn how to study. And yes, you have to study on weekends too, right? So when we are in session, when we are, you know, fall or spring semesters, you really have to be focused and dedicate yourself, because if you don't, with few exceptions of students who are very talented, most of us, including myself, we work. You know, what we say is it's 99 perspiration and 1% inspiration. So we sweat a lot. I feel it's blood, sweat, and tears. But if that's what you love, then you have to fight for it. But it does require a lot of work on your part to achieve your dream. And if that's your dream, that's what you do.
And then now you're a biology major, and what would be next for them after they leave Lyon? What kind of options do biology majors have?
So biology is really an interdisciplinary major. You can't major in biology without chemistry, physics, and math, right? And biology, of course. So there are so many different choices for biologists, and I usually joke that we'll never be out of job, because there is so much that we still need to learn, you know, about ourselves and about our natural world, that we will always have jobs for biologists. Biologists can go into academia, like myself, where you continue your education, go to a graduate program, get a master's and a PhD or one or the other, and you can stay. You can go and teach, you know, elementary school, high school, if you want to teach science. You can go and work in industry. That's another field. If you want to be like a researcher, if you want to be a scientist, you can work in agriculture. Maybe you can use the biology major to pursue, you know, agriculture. And then we have the health professions, which is actually, we attract a lot of students to Lyon that are interested in being biologists because they want to go to medical school, dental school, vet school. Those are the classic ones. We also have students who want to be maybe physical therapists, occupational therapists, but those it kind of splits between among biology, exercise science, and psychology, because they can choose any of those majors. But yeah, there are lots of options. People work at hospitals. You know, they can be phlebotomists. They can be, I don't know, now we have a nursing degree here. So if they want to be nurses, I would recommend that they talk to Dr. Becky Lee, because they don't need to be biologists if they want to be nurses. But that is actually a path that we've had in the past when we didn't have the nursing program. So yeah, lots of options: academia, industry, health professions. Very wide field.
All right. Your bio now says that you are, and you mentioned a geneticist and an evolutionary biologist. So you have a business major and an English major here, and we're already intimidated.
I told you, you don't have to.
But we are. So, can you walk us through exactly what does a geneticist and an evolutionary biologist do?
So a geneticist is somebody who studies heredity, right? Traits that are being passed from one generation to the next, and variation. So in our species and other species, having variation in the population is extremely important, because when our environment changes, then if you don't have variation, let's say that's a problem with crops. If all the crops are the same, right? They have high yield, but they're all genetically the same, and you have a disease, then they all die. Right. But in nature in general, those crops that are now, if you think about them in the wild form, they have a lot of genetic variation. Okay. Maybe I can give an example from COVID, right? That we have, unfortunately, a number of people who died because they were all susceptible to the virus, right? And then other people didn't. Or maybe a better example would be the Spanish flu, right? When we had millions and millions of people die. Well, nowadays, only a few of us will die every year, but that's because most of us, we are resistant to those strains of the influenza virus, right? And so the idea of genetics, when we study genetics, you're trying to understand how traits are being, passed from one generation to the next, the reason why children resemble their parents,
Yeah.
right? It's because we get 50% of our DNA from our mom, 50% from our dad.
Right.
Okay. If you put that in the context of evolution, so evolutionary biologists, we are interested in a number of things, and most of them will be around understanding how we are changing over time. Right. And so evolution is changing allele frequencies over time, how our genes are changing over time, right? How can you go from, I don't know, from an invertebrate, right, to a vertebrate millions and millions of years later, right? And in case if you don't know, we share 50% of our DNA with bananas. Because, yes, that's right.
Okay.
Because...
Bananas.
Yes.
I've heard all bananas are clones. Is that true?
Most of them, not all of them.
Okay.
But yes, they can reproduce both sexually and asexually. But why?
Yeah,
How can what? Sorry.
Jayson's all. Once you said asexually,
propagate. Well,
I was laughing at your response to it because it's just like it's so interesting.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's by propagation.
Right.
Like you take a piece of them and they will propagate. That's what I mean. You know how sometimes if you pick up a leaf and you put it in water, it will sprout roots.
Yeah,
that's asexual reproduction because you didn't have the pollen fertilizing the egg to produce a new plant.
But a banana with a human, that's two different.
Yes.
Simplistic way, it's two different life forms. Yeah.
We are very different, but if you learn about evolution, you will learn that we all share a common ancestor, right? So if you go back enough in time and life in our planet started 3.5, 3.7 billion years ago, then we will have some homology with all these different species, with all these different life forms, including bacteria.
Yeah. Okay.
And so if you think about like fruit flies, right? Drosophila, which I study, we share genes with fruit flies as well. And
they've been around.
They've been around, I mean...
Dawn of time?
Dawn of time is a very generic term. But,
Fruit flies showed up.
you can go back like 400...
I promise not to talk any more science. Talk like I know what I'm talking about.
But think about this. Let's go back like 400 million years ago, okay, which is a long time for us to think about because our species, as Homo sapiens, we have been around for maybe 300,000 years. Right. So we are a very recent species. Our most recent ancestors, we can go back like 6 million. But yeah, so the idea that we share genes with bananas and fruit flies, it's because we all share a common ancestor that we descend from, So one of the things that I really dislike when people think about evolution is that evolution is a linear progress where you start with a primate, like a monkey, and we are primates too. But then that monkey keeps like evolving until you're the human in a way that it's almost like you're replacing one species with another. Right. But that's not how evolution happens. Evolution is more like a branching tree, and we are all branches on the tree. And if the branches reach the tip, it's because we are still around. But if the branches are short, that's because those species are already extinct. And like 99% of all life on Earth, all life that has existed on this planet is extinct, so they don't exist anymore. Right. But yeah, so like if you study fruit flies, you can study addiction. Fruit flies love beer and wine, and that's why Sandy Beezer and I can't teach genetics when he teaches fermentation because I have fruit flies in the lab, and my fruit flies will like his beer, and that's a problem for him.
All of a sudden now,
but yeah, so again, you can study fruit flies to learn so many different things that can be applicable to humans. Things like sleep, addiction, aggression, because. Yes, we share a common ancestor with them. So many of the genes we have we actually share with them. Okay. Of course, certain things we need to choose a species more close to us, a vertebrate, not just an invertebrate. But
with evolution, it's you're describing it as a natural process.
Yes.
Somewhere does man in general, interfere with that and try to alter it? What's the outcome of that?
Well, it's interesting that you ask that because when Charles Darwin, who is the founder, considered the founder or the father of evolution, one of the ways that he came up with his theory of natural selection was that he was looking at animal domestication, which and plant domestication, which is a process that we humans started like 15,000 years ago, right? So if you look at all the dog breeds that we have, we decided on the traits we want.
Yeah.
And
true.
because there is genetic variation in the species, you can pretty much choose how you want to go. Do you want a bigger animal, smaller, longer ears, longer fur, right? You can change that. And so Darwin thought, if we humans can be the agent of selection and change these animals and plants, why can't we have a process in nature? So the process where humans change species is called artificial selection.
Right.
When we produce those crops and domesticate animals, and then Darwin proposed natural selection.
Which then you're getting into eugenics and scary things like that.
No.
Oh.
Natural selection is a process where if you have genetic variation, right? So as long as, think about minions, right? Despicable Me. If everybody's a minion...
You got Jayson now.
there's no genetic variation.
Right.
They're all the same. They all like bananas, right? What else, Jayson? Like, they're all the same. No. Well, actually, there's some...
different because some have 2 eyes, some will have 1 eye.
Yeah, but they're still minions.
But they're still the same thing.
Yeah.
So let's say those minions all run at the same speed. If they run at the same speed, can we have a race?
No.
Be a tie.
It'd be a tie. And if those minions are being chased by a predator...
Somebody's going to learn to run fast.
So in theory, humans aren't the only species that could do artificial selection.
Well, we are the only ones that can do artificial selection because then other species doing it is natural selection. So if you have a predator chasing a real prey, then it's natural selection. But as I was saying, if you have natural selection, you have variation, which is genetic variation, right? And then the trait has to be heritable, okay? Because let's say if Jayson color his hair green and he decides to have a kid, his kid is not going to have green hair,
right?
Because he changed his phenotype, not his genotype, right? He didn't change his DNA. So changes have to happen at the DNA level. And then if you have difference in fitness, where like if the minions, right, if they are all the same, then there is no variation, there is no difference in fitness. But if you have those who are faster than the other ones, then the faster ones will escape and the other ones won't.
Right.
Is it possible in biology because you brought up the green hair, is it possible in biology to technically create like I guess it'd have to be like an abomination of some sorts, but something that has like a human with like different colored hair than what we normally have now? Like,
hey, I would go up beyond that. Yes, we can produce GMOs, which I'm a fan of. I know some people don't understand that.
Well, but to follow up, let's get in a moment. We'll talk GMOs, but as far as what Jayson said.
But that's what I was gonna say. That we don't have any gene in our body that will give us green hair. But we could technically genetically modify humans to express like a GFP gene, which is green fluorescent protein. So not only would have green hair, it would glow in the dark. How about that?
Count me in.
Like petunias. Recently a company released petunias that glow in the dark.
Yeah.
So you don't even need to buy Christmas light anymore. You can just, sun goes down, your flowers will glow.
GMOs, they've gotten such a horrible reputation. It's kind of that, it's science that's kind of running amok, and we're digesting things we don't quite know are safe, and what outcomes will happen. Maybe it's going to take decades to see. But what are your thoughts? You seem very pro
I am.
GMO. So
as a scientist, I think GMO allow us to produce products that otherwise we would need decades to do. Right. So again, if you go back and think about selective breeding, which a number of scientists do, right? When we produce crops, it can take decades for you to keep selecting. Let's say you want a more yield. So what do? You select plants that give you more yield and keep crossing those every time, right? But it's a long process. genetically engineering products, we can then make those changes much faster, right? I think GMOs are the future for us. They are the future of science. And I think
all the food,
food insecurity.
Yeah, that's where you get.
But, I feel it's almost like gluten. Nowadays, I don't remember, there was an actor that said that, in Hollywood, people are so scared of gluten that if you go to a store with a bagel, people will run away because nobody want to eat carbs anymore because they're so scared of gluten, right? But it's the same with GMOs. I feel a lot of people, they don't even know what GMOs are and how they're produced, and they have this idea that they're not safe, and they are safe in general. It doesn't mean that, we live in a capitalistic society, so those companies, yes, they are out there for profit, but there are so many different types of GMOs, those that can increase vitamins, that can be drought resistant. So it's not just your, like glyphosate, which is the one that's more controversial, because you are adding a herbicide. But there are so many other GMOs that are super cool. I actually recently bought the purple tomato, and I'm very excited about it. I haven't planted them yet. I have the seeds. So this is a tomato that expresses high levels of anthocyanin, which is commonly found in blueberries, any fruit that is, like a beautiful dark color, like purple. It's because it has high levels of anthocyanin. So the purple tomatoes have been genetically engineered to express more anthocyanin, and they're beautiful. But I don't know if they're flavorful, so I need to plant mine.
Is purple the most rare color in nature?
No.
Biology? Is it blue?
I don't know which one is rare, but why do we even have colors in nature?
Well, like something like a purple tomato, though, there's some, I don't know if it's with biology, there's something that you would look at that and say, I can't, it's unfamiliar. It may have spoiled, or there's like
the purple.
No, but color. Isn't there color cues that we take that for the survival of the species? You recognize certain things, and so here's a purple tomato. That's not what a tomato should be, and so I would avoid it.
But I would say it's more like color and smell, not just the color, right? And I don't think purple by itself elicit that response. I would say like blue cheese. Like the first time I saw blue cheese, I'm like, oh man, this cheese is bad.
Right.
And it's not, because the fungus that is in there, it's edible. It doesn't make us sick, so we can eat it. But yes, it is true that, anything that resembles feces or have like a nasty smell, vomit, those things, yes, we will stay away. Why? Well, because you have
to survive.
Yes, you don't want to get sick by being exposed to it, right?
Oh, man. So where is the whole field of genetics? Because you would think that, there's this promise for just, just a wonderful world in so many ways, but then cue the Netflix science fiction movie and everything, that there's just so that all people worry because there's so many things that can go bad.
But we need to remember that it's really how we use it, right? Just how we can misuse a knife or the knowledge we have in physics. It's the same in biology. And genetics has a lot of promises. We briefly talk about, like you mentioned, about eugenics, which was a catastrophe, but that's because of how we use genetics, which was in a wrong way. But, you see, like, genetics has the power of cure people from genetic disorders, which are clearly, many of them are fatal. And that's heartbreaking for families and for patients. And so genetics, especially nowadays with CRISPR, with gene editing, we are, FDA recently announced the use of CRISPR to treat sickle cell anemia, which is a genetic disorder. And it's debilitating for the people who have it. So, for me, science is for the good as long as we use it for the good. Right.
And cancer research, obviously.
Absolutely. Cancer is a genetic disorder. And so cancer happens because of mutations in our cells, right? One way or another. And it's interesting because you can now actually combine genetics and evolution, because just like a species evolve over time, a tumor evolves in the host. and you can see how the cancer is changing, right? And when you think about like cancer treatments like chemotherapy, chemotherapy will kill the tumor, but if it doesn't kill all the cells because some are resistant to the chemotherapy, what happens? Well, those that are resistant increase in number over time, and you have cancer again.
Oh, yeah.
So this is genetics and evolution, how we can use the science to understand a disease that is,
Yeah, I went through that with my wife, when she, because, it was like first episode, second episode before she passed away. And it was just, her treatment was real thorough. And even there, with surgery, chemo, radiation, removing the lymph nodes. It was, I mean, even there, how do you get every last cell? And the ones that are there are, there for a reason. They're very, very resistant, very strong, and.
But that's why the early diagnosis is so important, right? And like get your mammograms,
right?
And get your colonoscopy, and just take care of yourself because, I mean, sometimes it can take decades for cancer to show up, but by the time it shows up, if you're already in a late stage, then it means that it's in different parts of your body, right?
Yeah.
It has metastasized.
How is it that you, with all the things to study, that you ended up like you saying with
this
fruit
field,
and fruit flies and everything? It just there's so many different paths.
Yes.
You could have taken.
I joke that if we could be immortal or at least live a few hundred years, I would do so many different things, Pat, because I love learning. And honestly, like I chose biology because I love nature. Right. But I could have gone in so many different directions. Actually, the first time I applied to college, because in Brazil you need to get admission to college, to each institution individually, I wanted to be a psychologist. And then I actually did not enjoy it as much as I thought I would. And then I switched to biology. And that's the thing. Sometimes I have students, they say, I'm undecided, and they feel bad. And I'm like, when I finished my PhD, I was undecided. I was, did I want to be a researcher? Did I want to go and be, more like in academia and be a professor, right? And so I think there are just so many different paths. And sometimes there is no right or wrong. You just have to choose one. And that's what happened to me. I just had those opportunities, and I took them,
When was it that it clicked that you enjoyed being a professor and enjoyed teaching?
It's interesting because when you go to graduate school, especially in biology or chemistry or in sciences in general, there is always this kind of expectation that you are going to be a researcher. And if you want to just go, not just, but if you want to go and like here, come and work in a small college, then it feels like, oh, you're not fulfilling your role, right? I think there are different reasons. For me, it was really because I want to have a better balance between my personal life and professional life. Because when you work at large institutions, it's pretty brutal, how much you need to publish, and the expectations are very high. I must say, though, at Lyon, we just wear like different hats. But I mean, I actually feel that I can have a much higher impact with my teaching than I would have with my research. And I mean, I love, I spent after my PhD, I did 2 postdocs because I love doing research. But when the time came that I had to decide professionally what I wanted to do, I decided that teaching was my priority. And I don't know, I guess from the beginning, I just always enjoy
and then
being
you
in the classroom.
took it a step further here at Lyon because you're involved like in like student advising and other parts of like curriculum development. Yes.
Well, so again, wearing the different hats, you go back. I mean, advising is something that all faculty we all have to do. But it kind of started for me when I decided to be the faculty house for this, the faculty mentor for Spraggins House. And my family and I, we live on campus for 4 years. And that's it was a great opportunity just because I got to work on different committees and groups and really honestly being more human, I feel. Being at Spraggins taught me how to see my students in a way that I hadn't seen before. And I appreciate the opportunity because I feel that I'm a better professor than I was before. But yeah, I do different things. These days I also serve as the assistant dean for the faculty. And yeah, so I kind of, I'm everywhere, I feel, doing different things. But they're all around our students and how to make their experience better from an academic standpoint. That's my job.
Yeah, no, it's one, and the students love it. You know, I mean, I stay close to, you know, in kind of my role, so I know what students are, and they speak highly.
Thank you.
Yeah, highly of you and everything. So yeah, I was just with doing a that intent to graduate now that.
Oh yeah, you have a bunch of mine, don't you?
Yeah, but you know, one student just said how you got an Embry research for over the summer. It's wonderful, you know. It's like because then you know she's on track, wants to be a dermatologist.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it's part of advising. It's part of my job to tell them about their opportunities. Because that's, you know, we want to help them to be competitive. And having a, you know, research during the summer where they're improving their skills, improving their resume, and making money too. It's a win-win-win, ding for them, you know. So I tell them, do you want to go and flip burgers, or do you want to go and learn some cool stuff?
Oh, yeah. All right, dramatic change the subject. Let's get back to evolution.
Yes.
Put as a forecast, kind of how humans are changing. They always are. What are we as a species going to be like 100 years from now?
Okay. I might disappoint you on this one because evolution in general is a gradual process. And by gradual, I mean, it's like it's the big view. You can't see it from the ground. You have to go all the way up. And that means that you have to see long periods of time, geologic time. And the reality is, as a species, we are newbies, as my son would say, because we have only been around as Homo sapiens like 300,000 years, right? So in the next 100 years, Pat, if you think we're gonna have like, you know, pointed ears and something cool,
tell me.
I don't know. I'm actually scared because
Jen, maybe you know, taking, you know, not trying to write a great science fiction story, but say it's long period of time. Is there anything that we can see,
man,
you know, as far as, you know,
it doesn't look good for us though. I feel like
more of a sedentary lifestyle versus
that's kind of what The Martian was talking about, like when the book was written, about what would happen if a guy, like, he doesn't stay there long enough, what would happen if someone stayed long enough and reproduced on Mars. And it's like crazy because like they say, like, because the way the sun is the distance from the sun and stuff like that, the eyes would actually, over time, your eyes would get like this kind of, and your skin would get like really brown and kind of crusty.
And different pressures too, right? You know, like when astronauts come back, they're usually taller because their vertebrae decompress. You know, and so that's kind of cool. Because we get shorter as we get older because of gravity. I
gotta get on one of Jeff Bezos' spaceships.
But so honestly, I don't know. I feel when I said I'm scared, it's because we treat our planet so poorly. We destroy the planet. We have high levels of pollution, which can contribute to diseases like asthma and cancer and other respiratory diseases as well. And then our diet is terrible, right? So, but I don't know if I see a lot of dramatic change in just 100 years. But over longer periods of time. I mean, think about, you know, our ancestors. We come from a lineage they were quadrupeds, and we are bipedals, and that's one of the reasons why we have backaches, because walking on two legs is tough on us. And maybe I could focus on this aspect, how like the prevalence of C-sections have increased. Like you think about countries like Brazil. Do you know that 90% of women in Brazil have C-sections?
Why?
That's a good question.
Just is it convenience that I know here's my delivery date?
It's crazy. And because, you know, C-sections should honestly only be used when you have the need. Right? Because natural birth is beneficial to the mother and the baby. Right? But what happened is, and this is a good thing that we have C-sections, because otherwise we would be losing mothers and babies. Let's say you have a big baby,
Yeah.
Well, if you have a big baby and that baby cannot pass through the birth canal,
Yeah.
and we don't have C-section, the mother and the baby will probably die.
Right.
But because we have C-sections, we now have the ability to give birth to bigger babies. So it could be that in countries where they're actually pushing for just having C-sections, that we will change and maybe have bigger babies. You know, I don't know, but it could be that's going to happen.
Well, just us as a species, we've gotten taller.
It depends on where you live, though.
Really?
Of course, it's all based on our environment. It's just like our skin color. You know, if you live close to the equator, you're gonna have dark skin because it's a protection against sun rays.
Okay.
But if you live in Finland, where you barely see light, you're gonna look like Jayson.
And also, the age thing is technically people in the past live as long as we do now, but because our technology is better, we just live longer.
Oh yeah, we live much longer now.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like we used to die more from extrinsic causes, meaning a predator would eat us, but now we die from intrinsic causes. We die from diseases. And, you know, we have a saying in biology that if we live long enough, we would all die from cancer, which is pretty sad. So unless we can find a cure to cancer, it would always kill us in the end. I'm sorry. That's pretty depressing. But
no, really, just because somewhere along the line the cells just mutate or
get
corrupted.
Think about ourselves as a car. The engine gets old. No matter how much care you take of that car, the car is aging. And it's like us. We just can't keep up with the maintenance. And that's why we reproduce and leave our eggs and sperm behind, right? And you know, produce embryos so you can continue our species that way. But yeah, it's hard for us to be immortal because if we become immortal, we become cancer.
I also heard, like, I know this is kind of like, but like this is kind of science fiction-ish, but like, you know how like when like species live long periods of time, so like they did this, like the study was done on like Yoda, for example. Like Yoda, you know how he lives to be like 1,000 years old or whatever. In theory, if humans grow older and can live longer, doesn't that mean that it also takes longer for us to then develop or something like that? Like we have childhood longer, like people are in that infancy state longer, supposedly.
Yeah, since this is all theoretical, we can pretty much predict whatever we want, right? It doesn't mean it's going to exist. But it's interesting when you think about if we were truly immortal, then we wouldn't have this mentality that we're actually old because we would never experience aging, right? So, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard to even talk about it because I don't think we are there.
True.
But yeah, we are constantly changing. And when I say changing is, you know, we have mutations that happen whether we cause them, right? Like if you smoke or maybe if you're drinking, and those can induce mutations, or even UV rays, right? Sunlight can induce mutations. So, but they're happening. And so we are evolving. The species around us are evolving. And I the thing that I like is it's all the way from the microscopic to the macro, right? So our planet is evolving, right? Tectonic plates are shifting all the time. Our universe is evolving, is expanding. One day our sun will die, right? So, I mean, everything evolves.
I'm all depressed. No. This fall, you're teaching evolutionary biology as a class?
Yes.
What can students expect? What's the syllabus, or what?
Sometimes the students have this misunderstanding that evolution is about attacking religion, and that's completely not the case. Students will learn a lot of things revolves around understanding the natural world, how we have diversified over time, the different mechanisms like natural selection, mutations, genetic drift, gene flow. These are things we talk. I just finished covering the chapter on macroevolution, where we talk about extinctions and there's, origin of species before that. So it's just interesting stuff. And many people don't know this, but evolution is the core of biology. You know?
No. Oh, right.
Yes. So we have a famous scientist in the 20th century, Theodorus Dobzhansky, and he said, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. Because evolution is what binds biology together, right? You can't understand the science of biology without understanding evolution, and you can't understand evolution without understanding genetics. And so they're all
That's
kind of
kind of
interconnected.
how you were.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, one thing that with species evolving, you always hear that we're going to be, there's going to be this important development. You know, they're going to drill for oil, or they're, you know, they're going to do something in the water, in, you know, the waterways, and then there's some endangered species, and then I guess endangered species eventually go extinct. Is that always a bad? Is that a bad thing, good thing, or it just is? I never really. I always thought it's sad that anything goes away, but there are probably reasons for that.
So when you think about life on the planet, going back like 3.5 billion years ago, right? And as I mentioned earlier, 98% of all species that have lived on this planet are now extinct. How do we know? Because of the fossil record, right? We have fossils to show when they originated and when they disappeared. So the fact that life is changing constantly and species are, you know, originating but also dying is normal. These are called fluctuations, right? In rates of origination and extinction. But, and I taught my students this last week about how we had 5 big mass extinctions. We call them the Big Five, which sounds like a football term, but it's not. It's the 5 big mass extinctions that we had in the past, you know, including the one that killed the dinosaurs. But the problem is now we are undergoing a 6th mass extinction, and for the first time in the history of our planet, is driven by one species. Do you want to guess which one?
Humans.
It's us.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we are killing species even before we have identified them is a catastrophe. Right. You know, the way that I feel is just like we have rights and responsibilities as citizens, I feel that we should also have rights, but responsibilities to our planet. And when we kill those species, we have no right to do it because we share the planet with them. This planet's not just ours. Right. And actually, we are the new ones here. Right. You know, some of these species have been here for millions, even billions of years, and we are making decisions that affect the whole planet.
And that happens through what? Just shrinking the rainforests, the Everglades,
the habitats. If we destroy their habitats, if we displace them, then we contribute to their demise. And so I feel that we need to be more respectful to nature for a number of different reasons, because remember, without nature, we will die too. And I don't think people realize it, that, you know, how they say you can't eat money? Yeah. We can't. So yeah, we can have all the money in the world, but if we kill the rivers and the ocean and pollute the air, we are doomed ourselves too.
On that cheery note, any other questions, Jayson?
Not really. I was gonna, when we were talking about
the minions.
No,
I know
with the minions. Well, no, it wasn't with the minions. It was actually about like, I wanted to know about the potato in particular.
The potato?
Because
what do you mean the potato?
So another thing, whenever I think of like biology, I think of like the Martian, and the reason why I do.
How you can grow potatoes in
grow potatoes in Mars, and I want to know because apparently, supposedly NASA has confirmed that you can actually do this. I want to know why the potato is just so strong that it can just grow in, like, just put it in dirt and it's just.
Well, I mean, you know, the potato is a tuber, and so if you leave it long enough, it starts sprouting roots. Right. Okay, which is pretty convenient because either you can eat it or you can plant it. Right. But I would say probably the reason. I mean, I think in the Martian movie it was really because that was what was available. Right. But like, I mean, potatoes have a lot of carbs, right? And so it will, you know, sustain itself for a long time, even, you know, if it doesn't have the leaves yet for photosynthesis. I'm sorry, I'm not a specialist on that.
I was just wondering because it's just like you have like all these other, like a lot of these other vegetables and fruits that need like very specific conditions. Like a huckleberry, like can only grow in like very specific places, you know, and then a potato uses.
Yeah, you know, if you have soil and you have some nutrients and water, it will grow for sure. But that's true for a bunch of other vegetables too. You know, so I can't tell you for sure if the potato is the best one of the options.
But even there, you know, it's you were talking about like crop, you know, as far as crop science. I mean, kind of one of the reasons I'm here today was my grandfather was from Ireland, and there, it was poor, that he was after the potato famine, but it was they still were trying to recover, and he he basically ran away from home, but there's something that it just wiped out everything, even a resilient crop like that.
Yeah, I teach a little bit about that, and it's amazing how a single crop, how much people depend on a single crop, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, farmers and farmers, they are at the mercy of environmental factors, right? So if it's too dry, if it's too hot, or if it's too cold, they can lose all their crops, and that's where the GMOs come in, in terms of giving those crops a chance of, they're not all going to be eaten by the insects. Right. They're not going to have to compete with the weeds, right? Or they will be able to withstand conditions that otherwise they couldn't.
Varying temperatures, everything.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, Cassia.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and I enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. and thank you, producer Jayson. Yeah. All right, and this is Pat Lynch, and we're going to wrap up another Career Pathways podcast. But before we sign off, I'm sure you're wondering, where can I find the Career Pathways podcast? Look no further. Wait, look. Oh man, I'm doing the big build up. Look no further. Jayson has the answer. Jayson, what is it?
So you can find the Career Pathways podcast on 99.97% of platforms. The same number of germs killed, supposedly not actually, but
close enough.
Yeah.
For an English and a business major.
Yeah.
But again,
shoe fits where.
And Cassia, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Career Pathways podcast. Take care.
This broadcast is sponsored in part by Lyon College and by KILT Studios.